So today we are going to be talking about the number one question that I get during kidding season, which is, should I leave this buckling intact? I get asked this at least 2 or 3 times a week during kidding season. Now this question is typically asked by someone who is newer to dairy goats. And they ask this question sometimes because they're worried that they're going to make a mistake and castrate a buckling who they should have left intact. More often, it's because they think that they can make a buck, haha, pun intended, by selling this little guy as an intact buckling. But before you do that, here are the questions to ask yourself. Why do you want to leave this buckling intact? If your answer to that is because he's blue-eyed, he's polled, he has moon spots, he is silver, the answer is no. That is never a reason to leave a buckling intact. Now, if you're saying, well, I actually think I want to use this buckling for my own breeding program, great. All right, let's carry on and see if he meets the criteria. Okay, so instead, this is what you should be asking yourself. Question number 1. Would I want to see this buckling's dam's udder on every single doe in my herd? Then ask yourself, would you want to see the sire's dam's udder on every single doe in your herd? The answer is no to these. No, we do not want to leave them intact. Now ask yourself, what was his dam's linear appraisal score, particularly in the area of udder? We should not be leaving bucklings intact with dams who have scores in the low 80s. And I personally will only want to see an excellent, an E for excellent, in udder in a dam that I'm considering keeping a buckling out of. Now, don't forget, ask that same question of the sire's dam. What were her LA scores and her LA scores in udder? Okay, so what's next? Now we need to look at, we are breeding dairy goats here. So we need to look at these little guys' dams production, milk production. How much milk did this mom produce? When we're breeding dairy goats, we need to be producing bucklings that are going to have daughters who put a lot of milk in the pail. This is very important. That's what these animals are designed to do. Now same, we want to go look, what were his sire's dam's milk production scores? What were her numbers? What was her volume like? Now, if you don't know where to find this data, it's on the CDCB. If you don't know where to find this data, you definitely don't have enough experience yet to be considering leaving a buckling intact. Now, for me, it's absolutely critical that this dam's udder, this buckling's dam's udder, is extremely well attached. I want to see strong rear attachments, lateral attachments, fore udder attachments. I want to see teats that are not spread out wide on the udder. They are right in the center of each half of the udder, pointing down. That doe also needs to have a very strong medial suspensory ligament. You might see a young doe whose udder seems to look good at first, and in a few years, after a few lactations, falls apart. And that is typically because of poor attachments and or a poor medial suspensory ligament. That is that ligament that holds up the udder in the middle. I do not want to be using a buckling, eventually will be a buck, putting out does with poorly attached udders that are going to break down over time. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, don't leave this buckling intact. If you have not yourself had the chance to go through linear appraisal or be under the eyes of a judge and learn, you're not ready yet. That's okay. That's okay. You have next year and the year after and the year after. But it is not wise to leave a buckling intact unless the answers to all of those questions are yes. His dam has a great udder. His sire's dam has a great udder. They're scored beautifully on linear appraisal. Their udder is extremely well attached, and they are putting out that milk in the pail every day and have wonderful milk production. Now you can actually look at the physical buckling himself. At this point, we haven't even talked about the little guy. So now I'm going to look at him and first of all, make sure he has no genetic faults that I want to be adding to my herd. So does he only have the requisite 2 teats, or does he have an extra teat or 2 extra teats? If he has extra teats, nope, that guy should not be a herd sire. Is his jaw structure, is there parrot mouth happening there? Definitely do not want to reproduce that. Then I'll look to some of the smaller details, like does he toe out? Is he cowhocked? That wouldn't be something you'd want to introduce into more children. That'd be something you'd want to be getting out of future kids. You don't want to be adding a quality like that. And of course, if you have a lot of experience in things like linear appraisal or show even, you will know what good conformation looks like on a kid. And if you don't, maybe not time to be leaving bucklings intact yet. So my final considerations for you. A buck, so this buckling, I know, just a little baby, hard to imagine the future, but this buck is going to go out into the world, and we do not need very many bucks to repopulate our species. Lots of does, great. Only need a few bucks for all the does that we have. Now, if a buck is not great, he is going to make a way bigger impact in a negative way than one bad doe does. Because of the fact that that buck is going to breed 1, 2, 12, 24. How many does is that buck going to breed in a lifetime? So if he's not great, he is going to be spawning for generations not so great animals. A doe can only produce so many kids in her life, but a buck, oh yeah, he can produce hundreds. So leaving a buck intact is a big choice. Another is, do you have a buyer for this buck? Keep in mind, even if you really like him and you leave him intact, and now he's got to be separated from his mom by the time he's a couple months old because he's going to be able to breed. But if you don't have a buyer for this guy, you're going to be saddled with him, and you're going to have to keep him separate from all your does. So I have a rule here that if even if it was a buckling I thought met all this criteria and I wasn't keeping him for myself, but I did not have a buyer by the time he's 7 weeks old, he gets banded. I can't just hold on to a buck indefinitely, because trust me, they cost a lot to feed and they're a big pain in the butt if they're not an essential part of your program. And the last thing to consider is that once you let this guy, you leave him intact and he's out in the world breeding does, you're going to see him again, even if he's not in your herd. You're going to hear about what his kids are doing, good or bad, and it could be pretty embarrassing to have a not so great buck out there producing not so great children. And for us who are registered with ADGA or any other registry, that buck's carrying my herd name. And I don't want to be putting anything out there that I regret. And I'll be seeing him out there in the world, or maybe I'll be seeing ads on Craigslist because those kids are not good. All right, those are my tips for whether or not you should leave a buckling intact. The answer 99% of the time is probably not. And every once in a while, there's a really special little guy who meets all that criteria, and you actually probably, if that's the case, you're probably keeping him for yourself because he's going to be used on your future kids. So Good luck, make good decisions, and thanks for watching. If you've been watching our tutorials for a while and they are helping you become a better goat keeper and a more knowledgeable goat person, please consider joining us on Patreon to support continuing making these tutorials.